the crime took place inside the evidence room, then the killer would have had to enter it. In order to do so, an ID card would have been required. An ID card? Oh! The ID card record. Officer Meekins brought the Blue Badger panel into the evidence room at, let's see, here, 4:50 p.m. If the crime took place before that time, then it would be 4:40. Aha! Ah! Miles Edgeworth, just what have you done? I never would have figured you had the nerve, boy. Drop the act, witness. It doesn't take a lot of thought to figure out it could have been me. Nope, I ain't getting it. I'm afraid I don't understand either. It's clear from the luminal test that blood was there. However, when the second crime took place, Officer Meekins and Officer Marshall failed to notice the blood. That means the blood from the first crime was wiped away by the real murderer. I would have had just 10 minutes to murder the victim, carry his body away, and clean up the blood. Unfortunately, that's physically impossible. That would mean the crime must have taken place before Mr. Edgeworth entered the evidence room. Let's take a look at that chart again. There's only one other card number remaining. 7777777. Talk about a lucky number. But wait, that doesn't make sense. How could Detective Goodman have entered the evidence room? Since there's no record of his card being used beforehand, he must have entered along with the real murderer. That's the only plausible explanation. He went in with 7777777. Mr. Edgeworth, please look into this ASAP. Find out whose ID number is 7777777. That's one too many sevens, Your Honor. Unfortunately, I'm unable to look up the owner of that ID card, at least at present. What? Explain yourself, son. The ID number 7777777 belongs to someone with a rank of captain or higher. Someone who is a so-called executive officer. We don't have the authority to inquire into such a person's identity. But that's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Just how? I'm not finished talking, Mr. Wright. There is one solution in which we can be granted such authority. If an official charge filed against an executive is accepted. An official charge? You're all like, aren't you? With your cover-ups and your forgeries. That's how the prosecutor's office operates. I take pride in my work, Officer Marshall. I would appreciate if you would keep your slander to yourself. Slander, is it? Okay. Let me ask you a question. Yes? No, not you. To her. In the defendancy over there. Your own little executive. Lotta? Don't be stupid. She's been charged with murder. Of course, we've looked up her ID number. And it's not 77777. Don't play me for a fool, partner. That's not what I want to ask. All I want to know is one thing about the incident. The SL9 incident? Answer me this, Chief Prosecutor. In that trial 2 years ago, did you really use legitimate evidence? Ooh. Do you need the witness to repeat the question, Chief Prosecutor? I heard him fine, Mr. Edgeworth. 2 years ago, I was in charge of the prosecution for that trial. At the time, we felt the powerlessness of the law. At least, I did. Lana? I became a prosecutor in order to suppress crime with the law. But before I realized it, we were the ones being suppressed by the law. Defendant! Just what are you saying? I'll ask you again, Chief Prosecutor. During that trial 2 years ago, did you really present all the evidence in court? Can you look me, an investigator in that crime, in the eye and say that you did? Chief Prosecutor, you didn't! I don't have to, Officer Marshall. Why won't you answer him? Drastic crimes require drastic measures. That's just the way it is. We did what we had to, in order for him to get what the verdict he deserved. But Lana! Even if it involved forging evidence. See? That's what I'm talking about. No! No! Order! 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 Lana's remarks caused such a stir. The chaos in the courtroom could not be quelled. The conclusion of the trial would have to wait until the following day. Damn, this got real. Alright, guys, I'm going to save my progress. And then I am going to WALK and we'll go from there. Just a reminder, if you're subbed, you get clips. But if you're not a subscriber, unfortunately, you have to sit through some ads because we don't want any pre-roll. And pre-roll, believe it or not, it's actually one of the biggest killers for any channel, which is why we run the ads. Let's get on with the investigation. February 24th, 3:12 p.m. Wright & Co. Law Offices. I'm sorry, Mr. Wright. I'm sorry for what my sister said. Drastic crime requires drastic measures. That's just the way it is. We did what we had to do in order to get him to get the verdict he deserved. I didn't know. I never knew that the SL9 incident was just another name for the Joe Dark killings. Sounds like everyone's heard about these killings but me. Lana wanted Dark convicted so badly. That's why she used me. That's why she used what happened to me. What do you mean, what happened to you? It's all here in the file. Joe Dark's last victim was Prosecutor Neil Marshall. When he murdered Officer Marshall's brother, he left behind an incriminating piece of evidence. But what did you have to do with those killings, Emma? On the night of Prosecutor Neil Marshall was murdered, Joe Dark tried to kill me. What? He tried to kill you? Officer Marshall's brother, Neil, was only trying to save me. So that means you... Yes, I was the witness in the Joe Dark trial. I didn't see that one coming. What happened 2 years ago? It was right about the same time, right about this time of the year. There was a terrible thunderstorm that day, unusual for the season. I was alone in my sister's office. We were planning to eat dinner together once she finished her work. Then suddenly, this terrifying man came bursting into the office. Joe Dark. It seemed like he was running from someone. He pulled out a knife and screamed at me. He didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. Just then, Prosecutor Marshall showed up. Jake Marshall's brother. Joe Dark tried to take me hostage. But before he could, Mr. Marshall tackled him. Then, what happened? I'll never forget it. Lightning struck, and the lights went out suddenly. A bolt of lightning flashed outside the window, lighting up the office for an instant. What I saw then burned a permanent picture in my memory. I can still see it now. A permanent picture? I don't remember the moment when Dark stabbed Mr. Marshall, so you weren't able to testify about that. No, I was only asked about when I was attacked. That must be why she made up the crime. Made it up? What do you mean? Provided bogus evidence? The prosecutor's office wanted that guilty verdict so badly. Lana forged evidence, and Mr. Edgeworth used it. Edgeworth? Yes, I'm sure he didn't know anything about it. He couldn't have known he was being given false evidence. Even so, that's when it all started. The rumors about Mr. Edgeworth, I mean. It's all my fault. I couldn't have just testified properly. None of this would have happened. So it's true. Even though he may not have known it, Edgeworth really was involved in falsifying evidence. After that case ended, Lana was never the same. She became cold, like she is today. She must not have been able to face up to what she did, especially not to Emma. What did you see in the instance that crime occurred? Dark knocked down Mr. Marshall and raised his knife. Neil Marshall was stabbed right in front of this poor girl. I don't remember what happened after that. Apparently, I passed out. When I came to, Lana was cradling me in her arms. Poor Emma. You've been through so much. I couldn't bring myself to testify about that instance. I tried, but the words just couldn't come out. I drew a picture, but it wasn't any good. 2 years ago, you must have been 14. That's understandable. Once it was all over, I made up my mind. I decided when I grew up, I'd become a scientific investigator. I wanted to be able to fight crime with my testimonies and find the evidence to make an airtight case. That's why Lana would never have to forge anything. I see. I think I'm finally starting to understand what makes Emma tick. But there's still something that bothers me about that crime. There's something that puzzles me, Emma. What is it? You said you were in Lana's office at the time, right? That's right. Why then would a serial killer come running in there? Not only that, but he was being chased by a prosecutor. Oh, there's no mystery there. Joe Dark had been taken in for questioning that day. Taken in for questioning? You mean by the police? Of course. This happened at the police department. He tried to run away halfway through the interview and fled into my sister's office. But why did he run all the way over to your sister's office? Because the detective offices and the questioning room are high across from the elevator. Across from the elevator? But Lana was the chief of prosecutors, wasn't she? No, silly. Didn't I tell you? 2 years ago, Lana was a detective. She was the best in the entire force. What? That's news to me. After all, the Joe Dark case, she transferred to the prosecutor's office and made chief prosecutor. Lana used to be a detective? I'd better have another talk with her. To the detention center. February 24th, detention center visitors room. Lana. Mr. Wright, it seems I keep causing you trouble. Falsifying evidence? I didn't think you were the type. Criminals don't mind playing foul. Why should we? But Lana, if you're wrong, an innocent person might be found guilty. Believe me, I understand the risks. Lana, Emma told me about you. Oh, about how you were a detective 2 years ago. And how the SL9 incident was the reason for your transfer to the prosecutor's office. That's right. Could you fill me in on the details, especially about that unusual change of jobs? I suppose you have the right to know, Mr. Wright. Day's trial. A lot of revelations were uncovered at the trial today, not the least of which was the fact that this case is largely connected to another one 2 years ago. Evidence from that case was stolen as well, though I expected as much. I know how obsessive Officer Marshall can be. That trial, it really wasn't fair, was it? I believed in you, Lana. No matter what happened, you always stick to the truth. It couldn't be helped, Emma. That trial 2 years ago, I sold my soul. Well, all drama aside, the fact of the matter is, at 5:15, there was no murder at the police department. Tell me it's not true, Lana. What the witness, Miss Starr, said about you stabbing Mr. Goodman with a knife. Lana, I don't understand. Why don't you tell us? Emma, this doesn't involve just me. I don't think I've ever seen Lana look so fazed before. Detective Lana Sky. It's true. I was a member of the police department 2 years ago. She was amazing. They still talk about all the cases she and Chief Grant cracked together. Chief Grant? He was the deputy of police back then, but he still worked the case scenes. Damian Grant. He was everything I aspired to be. They were the best team ever. They solved crimes before the reports could even be filed. Emma really idolizes her big sister. But now you're chief prosecutor. What happened? I always planned on becoming a prosecutor. The reason I became a detective was to gain experience investigating crimes so you could use that experience in court, right? Grant's help in the SL9 incident was crucial to its resolve. After that, he became chief of police and arranged my transfer to the prosecutor's office. Maybe I should ask more about the investigation of their trial 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was second in command of the detectives investigating Dark. Second in command? That means the investigation lead was Damian Grant, right? Yes. Deputy Chief Grant and I shared the same office and the same investigations. They even had the same office? We led a team of the best detectives on the force. Detective Goodman, whose case it was, Jake Marshall and Angel Starr. It was the first time Marshall worked with his brother. He was quite gung-ho. Without a doubt, Joe Dark was the serial killer. We asked him to come in for questioning. We were desperate for evidence. That's when his final murder took place. When he tried to murder Emma? Prosecutor Marshall was trying to save me from Dark. You see, the first person who happened upon the scene of the crime was me. Now you tell us? Damian Grant and Neil Marshall were the ones questioning Dark that day. The investigation was in its final stages, and Dark must have suddenly panicked. So he waited until Grant and Marshall let their guards down, then fled the room. From there, he ran straight to the office shared by Deputy Chief Grant and myself. That's where he found me. So you were the first person to run to the scene, Lana? It appears so. I was filing some papers while Grant and Marshall were questioning Dark. When I returned to my office, I saw 3 bodies on the floor and smelled blood. 3 bodies? Prosecutor Marshall, the victim Emma, who had passed out, and the suspect, Joe Dark. During the struggle, it seems Mr. Marshall struck a final blow before he died. Joe Dark had incurred a minor concussion and laid unconscious. What did you do? To be honest, I panicked. I picked up Emma, carried her out of the room, and just held her. Can't blame her after all her sister must have gone through. After that, I placed Dark under immediate arrest. Let me get this straight. You were all involved in the SL9 incident? That's right. Quite a coincidence, I don't buy it. What are you saying? There's no way everyone involved in this trial was also involved in that incident. Just by chance. But that case was solved 2 years ago. At least one person went to extremes because they didn't believe it was truly solved. Officer Marshall. Yes, his actions came as a surprise to me as well. Ever since his brother died, he's completely changed. Changed completely. I guess he wasn't convinced with the ruling against Joe Dark. Life doesn't end with the closing of a case. Everyone has to live the rest of their lives with their memories. That case might not be over yet. Emma was assaulted by Drake at the police department, right? Yes, in the office that Damien and I shared. The office that Mr. Grant now occupies by himself. The chief's office. Maybe we should have a look at the chief's office. The site of the final SL9 murder. Well, this is getting interesting.